After my sister's baby shower, I checked my safe. My wedding jewelry was gone. My cousin smirked. She needed a better start than you. I picked up my phone and said, then she'll love who I called. They laughed until 3 hard knocks hit the front door. My name is Wren Hartfield. I am 34 years old. I am a paralegal at a civil litigation firm. And I want to tell you about the 9 days between that baby shower and the afternoon 3 people knocked on my front door. If you have never been through something like this, I hope this finds you before you need it. If you have, then you already know what it feels like to stand in a room full of people who love you and realize very quietly that love was never the lock you thought it was. Stay with me. And if this kind of story matters to you, please subscribe to this channel. There are more. I should tell you what my life looked like before that afternoon, because I think it matters. I make $47,800 a year. Before taxes, that sounds like a number that belongs to someone else's problems. After taxes, it is $3,120 a month, and I will tell you exactly where it goes, because I think people should say these things out loud instead of letting others assume. My mortgage is $1,070 a month. I bought the house 3 years before I married Nathan, when rates were low and I had saved for 4 years, and my credit score was the one thing I had built entirely alone. My car payment and insurance together are $364. My student loan from the paralegal certification program, which I completed at night over 2 years while working days, is $195 a month. Groceries and household expenses run about $290. That leaves $1,201. Some months, $980 if the car needs something or the furnace filter light comes on. I am not telling you this so you will feel sorry for me. I am telling you this because for a long time, my family looked at my house and my husband and my steady job and decided I had plenty. I am telling you this so you understand exactly what was in that safe and what it cost me to put it there and what it meant that it was gone. I passed the state paralegal certification exam on my first attempt. The exam fee was $340. I had worked Saturday mornings for 2 years at the firm, without overtime, a project-based arrangement I agreed to because my supervising attorney had agreed to sponsor me for the exam in exchange. 2 years of Saturday mornings. 11 months of skipping my dental cleanings, once for $180 and once for $160, because the month I could have scheduled them, the car needed brake pads. I found the receipt for those dental appointments in my desk drawer the week after the shower. I was looking for the jewelry appraisal. I want you to hold that image for a moment. A woman sitting at her desk, looking for documentation of a theft, and finding instead the record of all the things she had quietly chosen not to give herself. The $340 exam. The $340 in dentist appointments. The Saturday mornings. That is who Rhonda decided had enough. My sister Darlene is 28. She is kind and funny, and she has always been certain that things will work themselves out, which I think she inherited from our mother, and which I think has served her well enough that she has never had reason to examine it. We grew up in the same house, Darlene and I, with the same parents and the same street and the same dining table. And we came out of it as 2 completely different theories about how the world operates. Darlene believes that the people who love you will catch you if you fall. I believe that the people who love you will try, and that the responsible thing is to fall as rarely as possible, and to build something strong enough to catch yourself when the people who love you are not looking. I do not think either of us is wrong. I think we just learned different lessons from the same evidence. When Darlene's first apartment fell through 3 years ago, her roommate backed out 2 weeks before move-in. The lease already signed. The deposit already paid, she called me from a parking lot and cried. I sent her $150 a month for 14 months while she got her feet under her. I did not tell our mother. I did not tell Nathan. I did not think of it as a loan. I thought of it as what you do. 14 months. $2,100. She does not know that number. I am not saying that as a complaint. I am saying it because I want you to understand the texture of what I thought family meant. I thought it meant you gave things quietly and you did not keep a ledger. Because keeping a ledger meant you were already preparing to leave, and I was not preparing to leave. I was wrong about the ledger. Rhonda is my mother's sister's daughter. She is 31, and she is charming in the way that people are charming when they have learned that charm is the fastest path between wanting something and getting it. She has dark hair and a loud laugh and a gift for making you feel, in the moment she is speaking to you, like you are the most interesting person she has talked to all week. I liked her. I want to be clear about that. I genuinely liked her. We had grown up in adjacent houses practically. Our mothers were close in the way that sisters are close when they have no one else who fully understands them, and so Rhonda and I had spent every Thanksgiving together since we were small, every Easter, every summer Saturday that was too hot to be inside. She was funny. She was the one who could make our grandmother laugh during the hard years, who could walk into a room full of people who did not know each other and have them talking to each other within 20 minutes by some alchemy I had never been able to name. I thought I knew her. Rhonda's mother spent the better part of 15 years comparing her daughter to me. I did not know this at the time. I only understood it later, sitting in my car in my own driveway with my hands on the steering wheel and the porch light clicking off above me. My aunt would say things like, "Ren always figures it out," and "Ren has her head on straight," and I think she meant them as compliments, and I think she thought Rhonda was not listening, and I think Rhonda was always listening. What Rhonda heard, for 15 years, was a verdict that had been handed down at birth and never revised. She heard, "Your cousin is the one who succeeds." She heard, "Your cousin is the standard." She heard it at Thanksgiving and at Easter and at every summer Saturday, and I think at some point it calcified into something she could not undo. Some architecture of resentment so familiar she had stopped recognizing it as resentment and had started calling it observation. Rhonda did not hate me. I want to be clear about that too. Hatred would have been simpler. She had organized her entire understanding of the world around what she had decided I had too much of, and, one day, when a real crisis arrived and a real debt came due, and the options narrowed down to the ones she was willing to consider, she acted on it. She had been behind on rent for 3 months before the shower. I learned this later, from a mutual friend who had not known enough to keep it to herself. Rhonda had gone to her mother and asked for help and been refused, not cruelly, but firmly. With the particular firmness of a parent who has helped too many times and cannot help again. She had nowhere to turn that she was willing to turn. And then, she thought of the house I had bought alone. The husband I had. The job I had built Saturday morning by Saturday morning. The safe in the closet with our anniversary combination. She did not plan it as a theft. I believe this, actually. I think she planned it as a borrowing, the way people plan things when they have decided that the moral logic of the situation justifies the action, and they do not want to examine the logic too closely. She needed the money. I had things. She knew where the things were and how to get to them. In her version, she would pay it back. In her version, I would never know. She had not counted on me being a paralegal. She had not counted on me spending 4 months ago taking inventory photographs of my own home contents as a professional habit. She had not counted on the smart lock or the appraisal file or the pawnbroker who happened to do business with my firm and recognized the description of a garnet ring. She had not counted on me knowing exactly what a clean file looks like. 3 weeks before Darlene's baby shower, Rhonda called and asked if she could use my house for an afternoon. She was coordinating the decorations, she said. She had a rental car full of supplies, and her apartment complex had a policy against running multiple trips through the lobby, and could she just drop everything off at my place and sort it there? She would be in and out in an hour. I gave her the door code. I told her to make herself at home. I want to say that I hesitated. I did not hesitate. She was family. She was helping plan my sister's baby shower. The thought that the door code was a key to something she might want did not occur to me. It did not occur to me because I had spent my whole life believing that love was what kept the things you loved in place. The smart lock app on my phone recorded her entry at 3:14 p.m. on a Tuesday in early November. It recorded her exit at 3:56 p.m. 42 minutes. I did not check the app until 9 days later, when I needed to know when she had been inside my house. But I am getting ahead of myself. The baby shower was on a Saturday. Darlene had been my sister for 28 years, and watching her move through her own living room with her hands folded over the round of her stomach, pausing to hug each person who came through the door. I felt something so straightforward it is hard to name. I was glad for her. She was going to be a good mother. I knew this the way I know when a contract has been drafted by someone who understood what they were agreeing to. Partway through the afternoon, I slipped into the back bedroom to put a gift bag down. Darlene's son was already born, 3 weeks early, healthy, 5 pounds and 14 ounces, sleeping through the party the way only the very new and the very old can sleep through things. They had named him Jonah. I picked him up. I do not know why. Nobody had asked me to, and the room was full of people who would have been happy to hold him, but I wanted a moment out of the noise, and he was there. And he was warm in the particular way that brand new people are warm, like a loaf of bread just taken from the oven. He smelled like talcum powder, and something under it that I can only describe as trust. I stood with him for about 4 minutes. He did not wake. I put him back down and went back out to the party. About an hour later, Rhonda found me by the punch table. She touched my shoulder. Her hand was warm, still cold from the cup she had been holding. "You always land on your feet," she said. "I mean that as a compliment. Some of us just aren't made like that." I looked at her. She was smiling. Her eyes were bright and direct and completely sincere. "That is a kind thing to say," I said. She squeezed my shoulder once and went to find someone else to talk to. And I stood there with my pink punch and thought, she is right, actually, I have landed on my feet. And I felt, briefly, grateful to her for noticing. I drove home an hour later. Nathan was on the couch with a book. He looked up when I came in. "How was it?" "Good," I said. "Jonah is beautiful." "You okay?" "Yes," I said. And I meant it. I was fine. I went to the safe. Because I had 3 gift envelopes in my bag from family members who had asked me to deliver them to Darlene, and I did not want to leave cash sitting on the kitchen counter overnight. It is a habit. I have kept a small fireproof safe in the bedroom closet since I bought the house, and I use it the way most people use a junk drawer. A holding place for things that matter enough to protect, but not enough to think about every day. The combination is our anniversary. Nathan suggested it when I bought the safe, and I had laughed and said that was the kind of combination a villain in a movie would guess in 30 seconds, and he had said yes. But you will never forget it, and I had put in our anniversary. I opened the safe. The velvet tray was gone. It had held 4 pieces of jewelry. My grandmother's ring, a thin gold band set with a small garnet, nothing that would photograph well for a magazine, the kind of ring that looks like a ring until you know what it is, and then it looks like everything. Pearl earrings my mother had given me when I got my paralegal certification. The only time she had ever marked one of my professional milestones with something physical. A gold bracelet Nathan had clasped around my wrist on our first anniversary, and a pendant my father had bought my mother on their 10th anniversary, which she had pressed into my hand when she moved into a smaller apartment and said I should have it because I was the one who had driven her to every apartment viewing and carried every box and stayed until the furniture was where she wanted it. 4 pieces. Appraised value, $8,400. I had filed the appraisal 4 months earlier as part of the firm's standard homeowner documentation protocol, the same process I walked clients through every week. I had done it for myself on a slow Thursday afternoon and thought nothing of it. I stood in the closet doorway for a long time. I did not scream. I did not call out to Nathan. I went to the kitchen and I sat down at the table, and I placed my hands flat on the surface, and I breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth the way they teach you in certification training when you are working a document intake and the file is worse than you expected. Then, I went back to the bedroom and I took photographs of the inside of the safe. The interior. The combination panel. The empty tray slot. 7 photographs from 2 angles. I noted the time in my phone, 7:43 p.m. Saturday, then I opened the Smart Lock app. The last external entry that was not Nathan or me was Tuesday, November 8th, 3:14 p.m. Duration of visit 42 minutes. I wrote the time on a post-it note and stuck it to the kitchen counter. Then I went and sat back down. Nathan was in the doorway. "Come sit with me," I said. He came and sat across from me. He looked at my face. "What happened?" "Something from the safe is missing," I said. "I need to make a few calls tomorrow." He looked at me for a moment. "All of it?" "Yes," he was quiet for a second. "The ring." "And the others?" He put his hands on the table, close to mine but not touching. We sat there for a while in the kitchen, the overhead light buzzing faintly the way it does, and I did not cry and neither did he, and eventually I made tea, and we went to bed, and I lay in the dark with the ceiling above me and the post-it note on the kitchen counter downstairs, and the 42 minutes turning over and over in my mind like a number that does not reconcile. Sunday I called the appraisal service and confirmed the value on file. $8,400. I asked them to email me the documentation again for my records. They did not ask why. Monday, I called our firm's homeowner liaison to pull the documentation photographs I had taken 4 months earlier, images of all 4 pieces, with timestamps and appraisal reference numbers attached. 7 photographs of the jewelry. 7 photographs of the empty safe from Saturday night. I set them side by side on my desk. Before, after, I have spent 7 years reading files that other people made and then regretted. I know what a clean file looks like, and I know what a file with holes in it looks like, and I know that the distance between justice and nothing is often just the quality of the paperwork. I had, by accident, the best paperwork I had ever assembled for a case that was not yet a case. I printed the Smart Lock access log, every entry for the past 30 days. I highlighted the one from November 8th. I printed the appraisal. I made a folder with 3 tabs: documentation, access, transaction, and I left the 3rd tab empty. The way you leave a page in a report when you know the information is coming and you want it to arrive in the right place. I wrote the date at the top of a fresh intake sheet. I did not fill anything else in yet. I was not ready to call it what it was. There's a thing that happens when you work in law for long enough. You stop being surprised by what people do, and you start being surprised only by how clearly they leave the record of it. Most people who do something they should not have done spend a great deal of energy believing that the thing they did is not the kind of thing that gets found. They are wrong about this with a consistency that I have come to find almost comforting. Things get found. Things always get found. The only question is whether someone is paying close enough attention and has the right training to read what was left. I had the training. I had, by professional habit, the photographs. I had a smart lock because Nathan had wanted one, not because I had anticipated needing to know who entered my house and when. I had, in short, built the case before I knew there was a case. That is what 7 years of working civil litigation does to you. It makes you careful in ways you do not notice until you need to be. That afternoon, my office phone rang. I almost did not pick up. It was a number I did not recognize, a local area code but not a client number I had on file. Hartfield Legal, I said. Is this Ren Hartfield? A man's voice. Careful, the way voices get careful when they are about to say something the other person has not asked for. Speaking, this is Darren Pollock, over at Pollock's Secondhand and Pawn on Route 9. A pause. I do business with your firm sometimes. Estate resale, probate items. Your supervising attorney has my card. I know the shop, I said. Another pause. I had someone come in last Thursday, brought in 4 pieces of jewelry for sale. Gold band with a garnet, pearl drop earrings, gold bracelet, anniversary pendant. I logged them under the name Hartfield. The seller said it was her name, said the pieces were inherited. I did not move. The room did not change. The fluorescent light above me did not flicker. My hands, both of them flat on the desk, did not change position. What did the seller look like? I said. He described her. Dark hair, 30, maybe a little younger. Laughed when he told her what he could offer, like the number was lower than she expected, but she was going to take it anyway. What did you pay? $2,600 for the lot. I wrote $2,600 beneath $8,400 on the post-it note. I drew a line between the 2 numbers. I put the pen down. I looked at those 2 numbers for a moment. $6,800. The difference between what my grandmother's ring was worth and what my cousin had accepted for it. The difference between what I had and what she got. The gap between those 2 figures was the price she had put on my grandmother. On my mother, pressing those pearl earrings into my palm. On Nathan, clasping a bracelet around my wrist and saying nothing. Just smiling. Because he is a man who understands that some things do not need to be said to be meant. $2,600. Mr. Pollock, I said, I need you to hold those items and not release them to anyone. I am going to be filing a police report this evening, and I am going to need your transaction record, date, time, the name given, whatever identification was presented. I already pulled it, he said. That is why I called. I asked him to fax it to my direct line. He did, while I was still on the phone. I watched the pages come through the machine beside my desk, the transaction record, the description of the items, the name logged as seller, Ren Hartfield, and at the bottom, under identification presented, the words library card. A library card. As identification. At a pawn shop. In our state, a library card is not a valid form of identification for a pawn transaction. This is not obscure knowledge. It is printed in the standard disclosure notice that every licensed pawn shop is required to display at their front counter. Rhonda had either not known this or not cared. It meant the sale was procedurally irregular. It meant the items were still, technically, in legal limbo. It meant there was a mechanism to put them under hold immediately. I slid the facts into the third tab of my folder. I clipped the pages together. I labeled the tab. After I hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time. The light above me kept buzzing. The post-it note sat in the center of my desk with its 2 numbers and the line between them. $2,600. For $8,400 worth of irreplaceable things. My grandmother's ring. My mother's gift on the day she acknowledged my work. Nathan's first anniversary bracelet. My father's proof that he had loved my mother once, in a concrete and documented way. Rhonda had carried all of that into a second-hand shop and walked out with $2,600 and used my name to do it. I held the folder in both hands. 3 tabs. Clean throughout. No gaps. I thought about my grandmother pressing the ring into my mother's hands. I thought about my mother pressing it into my hands at the estate meeting, the one where my uncle had claimed it had been verbally promised to him, the one where nobody had documentation and so the loudest voice won and the ring disappeared. I thought about being 17 and understanding, for the first time, that the space between it was taken and it disappeared is just a piece of paper. I had the paper now. All of it. I closed the folder. I set it in my bag. I drove home. I pulled into the driveway and I turned off the engine and I sat there. The porch sensor light came on when I pulled in. I watched it. It stays on for 8 minutes unless something triggers it again. I put my hands on the steering wheel. I could not make them let go. This is the thing about being someone who handles documents for a living, you understand, at every stage of a case. Exactly what the document means. You do not have the luxury of not understanding. A police report filed with my name as the seller means that a stranger in a shop 2 towns over has a record stating that I sold my grandmother's ring. It means that the ring, the last physical object my grandmother chose to pass down, the one she pressed into my mother's hands in a hospital room in 1987, is logged in a transaction database under a lie that Rhonda told using my name. My name. The porch sensor light clicked off. I had been sitting in the dark for 9 minutes. I went inside. Nathan was in the kitchen. He looked at my face and did not ask any questions. He put the kettle on. I sat down at the table, and he set a mug in front of me, and I opened my laptop, and I pulled up the intake template that our firm uses for personal property theft with suspected fraud components. I filled in every field: date of discovery, date of suspected offense, items taken, estimated value, evidence collected, smart lock access log, appraisal documentation, transaction record from Pollock's with items matching description, name provided to pawn shop, Wren Hartfield, referring party, Wren Hartfield. I signed it. I set it next to the mug. Nathan sat down across from me. He had not read the form. He did not need to. It was Rhonda, I said. He was quiet for a moment. How do you know? The smart lock. 42 minutes alone in the house. I turned the post-it note toward him. The 2 numbers, the line. He looked at the numbers. He looked at them for a long time. Wren, he said. I know. Do you want me to call her? No, I said. I closed the laptop. I want you to let me handle it the way I would handle it for a client. He nodded. He looked at the mug, then back at me. I almost changed the code, he said, when she came to drop off those decorations. I thought about it. He did not look up when he said it. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. I did not say anything. There was nothing to say that the 2 numbers on the post it had not already said more plainly. The next morning I submitted the police report through the firm's standard referral channel. A case number was assigned within 4 hours. Detective Rawls called me at 2 in the afternoon to confirm receipt and tell me that the transaction record from Pollux had already been flagged. Rhonda had presented a library card as identification, which was not a valid form of ID for a pawn transaction in our state, which meant the sale was procedurally irregular and the items could be placed under legal hold immediately. I wrote the case number at the top of my intake sheet. I called Darlene. She picked up on the second ring, that new mother quickness, always slightly breathless. "Ren, is everything okay?" "I need you to have Rhonda come to my house Saturday afternoon," I said. "I need you and your husband to be there. And I need you to understand that this is not a conversation I am willing to have over the phone." Silence, a soft, specific silence. "Ren, what happened?" "I will explain Saturday," I said. "Please, just make sure she comes." Another silence. Then, "Okay." I had known Darlene for 28 years. I knew the shape of her silences the way I know the shape of a contract, what each clause means, where the gaps are, what the gaps are covering. This silence was guilt at the edges. Not guilt for what she had done, guilt for what she suspected and had not wanted to know. Saturday, I put 6 chairs around the kitchen table. I stacked the documentation folder in the center. I made coffee and set out cups, the way you do when you are about to sit down with someone for a long time. They arrived in 2 cars, which I had not expected. Darlene and her husband arrived first, Darlene carrying Jonah in the car seat, her face arranged carefully into something that was trying very hard to look neutral. Her husband, a quiet man I have always liked, took Jonah straight to the back bedroom and came back and stood in the hallway. Rhonda came with her parents, Aunt Patricia and Uncle Gerald. This I had not arranged and did not expect. Patricia came in first and kissed my cheek and went straight to the coffee pot, the way she has always done in any kitchen she enters. Gerald came in last. He was a large, quiet man who had always reminded me of a courthouse, built to last, rarely used for anything small. He nodded at me, sat down. Family friends arrived next. Tammy and Brandy, who had been at the shower, who Darlene had apparently called without telling me. They hugged me and went to stand by the window. My neighbor Opal Fenwick appeared in the doorway about 10 minutes later, holding a ceramic dish with a lid. "I was going to drop off your mother's pie plate," she said. "I didn't know you had company." She looked at the room. She did not leave. She stood in the doorway with the pie plate in her hands, and I let her stay. Then Rhonda sat down. She sat down the way she always did in rooms full of people, slightly sideways, legs crossed, arm over the back of the chair, the posture of someone who is comfortable anywhere. She looked at the table. She looked at the folder. She looked at me. And then she smiled. "Ren," she said. And her voice was warm. "What is all this?" I did not answer right away. I looked around the table. I looked at Darlene, who was looking at her hands. I looked at Patricia, who was looking at her coffee cup. I looked at Gerald, who was looking at nothing, at a spot on the table just to the right of the folder. With the stillness of a man who already knows what direction a thing is going and has decided not to get in the way of it. Rhonda shifted in her chair. "I don't know what this is," she said. "But whatever you're thinking, Ren, I'm sure we can talk about it." I opened the folder. I placed the appraisal document on the table first. 4 items. Values listed individually. Total, $8,400. I placed the smart lock access log beside it. Tuesday, November 8th. Entry, 3:14 p.m. Exit, 3:56 p.m. I placed the pawn shop transaction record on top of both. Date, November 11th. Items, 4. Amount paid, $2,600. Name given by seller, Ren Hartfield. I placed my photographs of the empty safe on top of everything. Then I folded my hands on the table and waited. Rhonda looked at the documents. The smile did not fall from her face, it stayed, but it went still. The way something goes still when the thing holding it up has stopped working. I don't know what those are, she said. Rung 1. They are the documentation for items taken from my home safe, I said. Items that were appraised 4 months ago and photographed at the same time, which is a standard practice I follow with my clients. The access log shows that you were the only person in this house alone between the last time I saw those items and the day I found the safe empty. The pawn shop transaction shows that someone matching your description sold 4 items matching the description of my jewelry and gave my name as the seller. Rhonda set down her cup. I was there to drop off decorations, she said. I didn't go anywhere near your bedroom. Rung 1, holding. The smart lock records every room with a sensor, I said. This was not true, but Rhonda did not know that, and more importantly, she could not know what I did and did not have. 7 years of handling cases had taught me that the moment you tell someone the limits of your evidence is the moment they start working around it. She moved on. Even if I did, she said. And here her voice changed slightly, a texture entering it. You have more than enough, Ren. You have the house. You have Nathan. You have the job. It is not like you were wearing that jewelry. Rung 2. The room was very quiet. Darlene was still looking at her hands. Tammy had stopped looking at Rhonda. Brandy was picking up her coat from the back of her chair. Aunt Patricia's hand tightened on the handle of her coffee mug. Uncle Gerald had not moved at all, had not looked up from his spot on the table, and I noticed that at some point in the last few minutes he had put down his coffee cup and had not picked it up again. I looked at Rhonda. She needed a better start than you, Rhonda said. Her voice was flat now, the charm stripped out of it. She was looking directly at me. That is all it was. Darlene needed a better start, and you have always landed on your feet. That is not something I should have to apologize for. Rung 3. There were 12 people in that room who had watched me absorb things my whole life. My mother's moving boxes, Darlene's rent, Rhonda's security deposit, Saturday mornings, dental appointments, things that had no receipt. I had absorbed them all, quietly, and every person in this room knew it even if they had never named it, and every one of them was waiting, in that moment, for me to absorb this too. I let the silence sit for a count of 5. You are right, I said. She did need a better start. Rhonda's eyes were steady, still holding. What she got, I said, was a criminal record. The front door knocked 3 times. Hard, deliberate. The knock of someone who has done this many times and knows exactly how it sounds. Rhonda turned. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. Detective Rawls was on the left. He was a compact man in a gray jacket, and he looked at me the way people look at you when they have read your paperwork and found it to be in order. Detective Pruitt was on the right, holding a folder. Miss Hartfield? Detective Rawls said. Thank you for coming, I said. Please come in. I stepped aside. Rhonda pushed her chair back so fast it scraped the floor. She stood up, and her voice went high and loose in a way I had never heard from her before. You called the police. It was not a question. It was a statement that was trying to sound like an accusation. You actually called the police on family. She looked around the room. She was looking for somewhere to put this, some face that would give her the room she needed to reframe it. This is excessive. This is Ren being dramatic. This is a thing that could have been handled differently, and the faces in the room did not give it to her. Tammy looked at the window. Brandy stood up. Darlene put her hand over her mouth. Aunt Patricia set her mug down. Uncle Gerald did not look up. He had not looked up for a long time. You turn this into a legal thing. Rhonda's voice was climbing, and she was pointing now, her finger moving across the table as if she could indicate her way out of this. All of this, over jewelry, after everything this family has been to you. After everything I did to help plan that shower, I was there for weeks. I was helping. I was the one who made the centerpieces. And you are going to bring police into my family over jewelry that you never even wore. I was still. My hands were flat on the back of my chair. My voice, when I used it, was the same register I use when I am reading a deposition summary to a client, steady and specific, without any heat in it. You performed for this room, I said. I reported to it. Rhonda stared at me. You always had to make it something, she said. 9 words. Delivered as a fact. She looked around the room one more time. The same room she had walked into an hour ago with her arm over the back of her chair and her voice already comfortable. Tammy was looking at the window. Brandy had her coat. Darlene's hands were over her face. Aunt Patricia was standing with her back to the room. Uncle Gerald had not looked up in 15 minutes. 12 people who had watched Rhonda walk into every room like she already owned it, and not one of them was going to give her what she was looking for. That was the humiliation. Not the detectives. Not the paperwork. The room. Detective Rawls took one step into the room. He did not raise his voice. Miss Rhonda Merritt, the room went the particular quiet that happens when a process that has been building for 9 days arrives at its destination. From the back bedroom, Jonah woke. His cry came down the hallway, thin, new, the cry of someone who does not yet know how to be afraid, only uncertain. It came into the kitchen the way water comes under a door, filling the low spaces first. Nobody moved. I walked down the hallway. I picked Jonah up from the car seat. He was warm and his face was red, and he pressed his forehead against the side of my neck and went quiet almost immediately. I carried him back to the doorway of the kitchen and stood there. Detective Rawls was speaking to Rhonda in a low, level voice. Rhonda had gone still in the way that people go still when the room has stopped responding to them. Her hands were at her sides. The performance had run out of audience. The room had been waiting 9 days for this moment. I had been waiting longer than that. Not for Rhonda specifically. For the version of this where the file was complete and the record said what actually happened and nobody in the room could smooth it over by changing the subject. Everyone in that room looked at Jonah first. Then they looked at Rhonda. Then they looked away. Darlene covered her face with both hands. Aunt Patricia stood up and went to stand by the window with her back to the room. Uncle Gerald looked up. He looked at me, holding Jonah, standing in the doorway. He was a large, quiet man who had always reminded me of a courthouse, and in that moment he looked like a courthouse that had just handed down a verdict it was not proud of. He said, "I know what she learned from me. I am sorry for it." 6 words that carried 6 years of a father watching his daughter become something he had helped make and not knowing how to undo it. I nodded at him once. It was all there was to do. Rhonda was charged that afternoon. The legal hold on the items at Pollock's was confirmed before the detectives left my house. The pawn shop transaction was flagged as procedurally irregular due to the invalid identification, which meant the sale had not been finalized in the legal sense, and the items were recoverable through the hold. I learned this from Detective Rawls in a phone call 4 days later. He read me the details the way someone reads details when they are impressed by the paperwork and do not want to say so directly. I had given him a clean file. The timestamps matched. The photographs matched. The access log matched. The pawn transaction matched. There was not a gap in it. "The items are at the precinct," he said. "You can come in any time to collect them." "Thank you," I said. There was a brief pause. "Ms. Hartfield, the paperwork you submitted was the cleanest intake I have processed in 4 years." He said it carefully, the way someone says a thing they were not sure they should say. I want you to know that. I thanked him again and hung up and went back to the client file I had been working on before the call. A woman in her 50s trying to recover a piece of land that a brother-in-law had quietly transferred out of a shared trust. Her file had gaps in it, documents that had not been saved, records that had not been dated. A chain of custody that depended on the word of people who were no longer speaking to each other. I was going to spend the next 3 weeks building what I could from what remained. This is the work. This is always the work. Someone who trusted the wrong person, a file with holes in it, and you trying to find enough paper to build a floor. Rhonda's attorney tried for 2 weeks to find a gap in mine. There were no gaps. She accepted a plea 6 weeks after the afternoon in my kitchen. Misdemeanor theft, restitution order for $2,600, the amount Pollock had paid, which she no longer had. Community service, a record that would follow her for the next 7 years every time she filled out a form that asked whether she had ever been convicted of a crime. The items were recovered in full. All 4 pieces. The velvet tray was gone. Rhonda had thrown it away, I later learned, because it was not worth anything to anyone who did not know what it held. But the ring, the earrings, the bracelet, and the pendant came back to me in a plastic evidence bag that I signed for at the precinct on a Wednesday morning before work. I held the bag in both hands in the parking lot for a moment before I put it in my bag. The ring was at the bottom. I could feel the shape of it through the plastic, the thin band, the slight raised setting of the garnet. My grandmother had worn it for 43 years. I had last touched it the Tuesday before the shower, when I had opened the safe to put away a document and run my fingers over the velvet tray the way you do with things you do not think you are about to lose. I drove to work. I put the evidence bag in my desk drawer. I processed 3 client intake forms and ate lunch at my desk and did not think about it very much, which is what it looks like, I have found, when something is finally, actually over. Darlene called me twice in the 2 weeks after. I answered the second time. I didn't know, she said. I know, I said. I should have asked you more. When you called and said to bring Rhonda over, I should have asked what happened instead of just going along. I should have, yes, I said. But you didn't, and that is something you are going to have to carry. I cannot help you with that part. She went quiet for a long time. Is this the end of us? No, I said. But it is the end of me absorbing things without saying what they are. She cried. I listened. I did not tell her it was okay, because it was not entirely okay, and she is 28 years old and capable of understanding that. What I have come to know about Darlene, what I think I have been working around my whole adult life, is that her certainty that things will work out has always been built, in part, on the bedrock of me making sure they did. She trusted the world because the world had always been caught by her older sister before it could drop her. I am not angry at her for this. But I am not the same person I was before the safe. I need you to know something, I said, before we hung up. The $150 a month. 14 months. I don't need it back. I never did. But I need you to know the number. I need you to stop thinking of me as someone who has so much that it doesn't count when things are taken from her. A long silence. I didn't know you were keeping track. I wasn't, I said. I just knew. She cried again. I let her. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, and then I made dinner. And Nathan came home, and we ate and talked about something else entirely, and the evening happened the way evenings do when the crisis has passed, and ordinary life is slowly filling the space where the hard thing was. Aunt Patricia sent a text 2 days after, I am very sorry. I don't know what else to say. I read it twice, I did not respond. Not because I was angry at her, I was not, particularly, but because I did not know what I had to offer her yet, And I have learned that it is better to say nothing than to say something that costs you something you have not yet decided to spend. Uncle Gerald I saw at a grocery store about 6 weeks after the plea. We were both reaching for the same shelf of soup cans. That small, ordinary collision that city life arranges for you whether you are ready for it or not. He stepped back. He looked at me. She is getting some help, he said. Counseling, a financial advisor. I am paying for it. I am glad, I said. And I was. Not only for Rhonda's sake, but because I had sat with the thought of her mother saying Ren always figures it out for 15 years, and I understood now, in a way I had not understood before, what that kind of comparison costs the person it is aimed at. Rhonda had taken something she had no right to take. She had also been handed a wound she did not ask for and had not been taught how to put down. I do not know how to make those two things sit neatly together. I have stopped trying to make them sit neatly. Gerald looked at me for a moment. He had something else he wanted to say. Then, he chose not to say it, the way that men of his generation sometimes absorb the thing they were going to do and substitute a nod instead. He nodded. I put my soup in my basket. We did not speak again. Some things do not need a final word. The absence of one is its own kind of resolution. The photograph came down 6 weeks after the afternoon in my kitchen. I noticed I wanted to take it down. Not in any dramatic way. I was walking past the bookshelf on my way to the kitchen, and I looked at it and I thought, I don't want that there anymore. So I took it down. I carried it to the hall closet, face down, and put it in a box with some other things from before. And I closed the closet door, and I went and made coffee. Nathan found the ring in the evidence bag in my desk drawer and did not say anything about it. 3 weeks after the plea was entered, he came home from work with a small dark box, and he set it on the kitchen table and said, "Open it." Inside was a new velvet case, slightly heavier than the old tray, a darker shade of burgundy. He had found a jeweler who made them custom, and he had ordered one the same week the items came back, and he had waited until it felt like the right time. He picked up the ring. He placed it in the case. The garnet caught the kitchen light the way it always had, that small, dark redness that looks ordinary until you know what it is. I held the case in both hands. I did not put it away. I sat at the kitchen table and held it for a while, and Nathan sat across from me, and the kitchen was quiet in the way kitchens get quiet in the evenings when the day has finished asking things of you. Some weeks after that, a Tuesday I think, or maybe a Wednesday, the kind of evening that does not announce itself, we ate takeout on the back porch. It was cold enough for a jacket, but not cold enough to go inside. The sky was doing that thing it does in late November, where the last of the light holds on for a few minutes longer than you expect before it lets go. Nathan handed me a container and a fork. He asked what I wanted to watch later. I thought about it. Something with no families in it, I said. He laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes from the chest, the kind you cannot perform. I laughed too. The food was getting cold and the porch light was on, and across the street my neighbor Opal Fenwick's kitchen window was lit up yellow, and I could see the shape of her moving around in there, making dinner. The ordinary domestic certainty of someone who is exactly where they mean to be. I held my takeout container. I felt the cold air on my face and the warm food through the cardboard, and I thought about the velvet case upstairs on the dresser and the ring in it. And I thought about my grandmother's hands pressing something into my mother's hands in a hospital room, and I thought about the $340 exam, and the Saturday mornings, and the $2. $100 I had sent to my sister over 14 months, and I thought about a man in a courtroom building saying I know what she learned from me, and I thought about my own hands on the police intake form, filling in every field, signing my name at the bottom. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be clear about that. Triumph is too loud for what it actually felt like. What it felt like was this, like a number that had not reconciled for a very long time had finally, quietly, come out even. A week after the plea was entered, Detective Rawls' office sent me a confirmation letter with the case number and the disposition and the restitution order attached. I filed it in my home records. Third tab. Behind the appraisal. I had kept the record. Nobody else was going to. So I kept it. Some things get taken. The ones worth keeping, you document. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe for more. And if you have ever had something taken from you and watched the room decide not to notice, I want you to know there is a version of this story where you are the one who fills in the form. You already know how to do it. You have always known. My name is Wren Hartfield. And I document everything.